Our next panel, we're going to be taking a dive into what is true versus what's being fed to the masses that might not be so true. We've got the fact versus fiction panel, and I'd like to welcome to the stage William Kirk of Washington Gun Law. There he is. We've got Shermichael Singleton from one of the best 2A production companies out there, Guns Out TV. Anthony Miranda, you guys might know him as the Armed Scholar. Jared Yanis, Guns and Gadgets. Beautiful entrance. We've got Braden Langley from Langley Outdoors. And Dr. John Lott from the Crime Prevention Center. Your host for the Fact versus Fiction panel is our very own federal lobbyist and host of the Minuteman Moment, Ben Sanderson.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. So hello, everyone. My name is Ben Sanderson. I'm a federal lobbyist for Gun Owners America. Obviously, as part of my job, I work to separate the facts and fiction when I'm talking to congressmen and their staff. And that's exactly what we'll be discussing on this panel today. Together on the stage, we have a wonderful group of individuals whose efforts are invaluable in the fight against this fiction. Why doesn't everyone introduce themselves and just give a little background?
Oh, okay. Well, my name is John Lott. I'm president of the Crime Prevention Research Center. I've been an academic most of my life. I've had positions at Stanford, University of Chicago, the Wharton Business School, Yale, UCLA, and I was chief economist for the U.S. Sentencing Commission, and more recently I was senior advisor for research and statistics in the U.S. Department of Justice.
You gotta follow that one. I mean, like, wow. I do YouTube. So my name is Braden Langley. I run Langley Outdoors Academy. I focus on politics, the 2A, the analytics, a lot of the activism that we really need to take into consideration while we're making our decisions moving forward. Along with a lot of the guys that we're on the board with, or the panel with right now, we are always putting out videos, and I swear you guys can reaffirm this. It's insane how much stuff's happening all the time. And that's one of the focuses of what we really try to hit on is not only what's occurring, but what we're going to do about it. And that's a big piece of what we do.
My name is Jared Yanis. I run Guns and Gadgets for over 11 years now. I've been trying to educate people about how the government infringes regularly on the Second Amendment. Previous life, I was a police officer, so I've seen it happen, and I've actually arrested people who have done it. But I still don't have a resume like Dr. John Lott.
My name is Anthony Miranda. Can you hear me? My name is Anthony Miranda. I'm an attorney in California. I formerly worked as in-house counsel for Firearms Policy Coalition. I have a YouTube channel, been doing it for 4 years, trying to educate people on the Second Amendment, lawsuits, all that fun stuff that we all cover. So, yeah.
Hey guys, good morning. Wow. All right, you can tell I do this quite a bit, right? My name is Shermichael Singleton. I'm a Republican strategist, also the co-founder of Guns Out TV. I've worked on 3 Republican presidential campaigns, Newt Gingrich, Dr. Ben Carson, and President Trump. Served in the Trump administration as the deputy chief of staff at HUD with Dr. Carson. And believe this or not, I am only one of 2 other conservatives who actually go on CNN and fight against liberals. And we need a whole lot of that. So hopefully we'll talk about that on this panel.
My name is William Kirk. I'm an attorney out in the People's Republic of Washington. I have a channel called Washington Gun Law. I've been doing it for about 3 years, and what we try to do is just take really complicated topics and break them down into small, bite-sized, simple English so that everyone can understand what's going on with your rights.
And he's the best dressed.
Well, always.
Always the best dressed.
Says the dude with the whatever shirt that is.
Now that everyone's introduced themselves, one of the things I see on Capitol Hill is crazy things from anti-gun staffers. Short-barreled rifles are more concealable and therefore more deadly, or that pistol braces turn any semi-auto into a machine gun because they're bump stocks. What do you think is an important piece of fiction that the average American needs to know is false?
If it's a politician who's anti any of our rights and their lips are moving, it's fiction. Uh, any politician who takes an oath to support and defend the United States Constitution and actively works to usurp that, they are spitting nothing but fiction.
Well, just as a brief comment on what you're saying, to me, everything has costs and benefits. So you want to go and say a gun is relatively inexpensive. Well, that means to me, relatively poor people who are the most likely victims of crime are able to go and defend themselves. If a gun is small and easily concealable, it could be easier for a woman who has smaller hands to be able to go and hold the gun. So, it has good stopping power. Victims want to be able to go and have that too. And so, often these discussions, they only think about the costs and not the benefits from these types of things. And that's where you have to go and measure the costs and benefits. But to answer your question about, I don't even know where to start in terms of what the most, I guess to me, the simplest point that I would make is that if you think guns on net are bad, name me one place in the world that's banned either all guns or all handguns and seen murder rates go down and even stay the same. Every single place in the world that's banned either all guns or all handguns has seen murder rates go up every single time, often by very large amounts. And so the notion that on net guns are bad seems like that's a pretty simple, powerful piece of evidence there.
I want to follow up on that. This argument comes up a lot when I'm on CNN and we're talking about firearms. And it is a significant misnomer that the government somehow through compulsory force removing certain types of firearms, particularly in inner cities or areas where there are a large amount of people in terms of migration where they reside, removing certain guns will keep those people safe. To the point that was just made by the doc down there, that's not true. Every crime statistic you can look at every CDC statistic, and you will find population areas where there is an increase or heightened number of people who actually own firearms. Maybe they're not even carrying every day, but just a gun in the home. Criminals are less likely to commit crimes in those areas because there's a higher propensity that the people in those areas will be able to defend themselves. And so oftentimes I have to try to explain to people who don't understand this that connection that they're attempting to draw is a false connection.
One of the things I would add to that is I think one of the biggest misnomers is that all of our gun violence or gun crime issues are created by lawful and responsible gun owners, because none of it is. In fact, if you look at the United States Department of Justice's own statistics, you see that 88.8% of all gun crimes committed in a year are committed by an individual who's unlawfully possessing the firearm at the time the crime is committed. But what do our state legislatures do? Do they write laws to go after that 88.8%? No, they write laws to go after all of you. The lawful and responsible gun owner is not the problem in this country. They're the solution.
Can I jump on that real quick? So, the one thing that we all know in this room, we know the statistics. We know that it's not correct what they're saying. Like your example, if the barrel's all of a sudden shorter or the overall platform is shorter, all of a sudden it's more deadly. That doesn't make any sense. So the question that I have for you is, why do they feel so comfortable to say something so factually incorrect and then repeat it ad nauseum? It's because it has an emotional reaction. It doesn't matter what it's actually based in fact. It doesn't matter. It's about the emotional reaction. They feel confident enough to where they will consistently lie to get the entire system going in that direction. We'll deal with the facts later. It's about the emotion. I think that's a big part of it.
And they win on the emotion every single time. One thing I have learned in politics when you're debating people, and those of us on the right, we're always great with the facts and the figures. We do exceptionally well. All of the data showcases this, and we're usually always right. But Democrats have understood something that we are finally, I think, starting to catch up with, and Trump is really effective in this regard. They can touch people on an emotional level. And so when you can get people to feel a certain kind of way, it doesn't matter what the hell the stats or the numbers say, because emotionally I feel connected or disconnected against something. And so we have to do a better job as individuals who love and support the Second Amendment of drawing a emotional connection and appeal to people. Firearms will keep your family safe. It will keep you safe, young woman. It will help you protect yourself in a dangerous community or neighborhood if you're living in an inner city. That's an emotional appeal. I don't have to cite rather stats to say, hey, this area is dangerous because you're living here. But if I can say, hey, having a firearm will keep you safe, when people say, well, I do live in a rough area. It is kind of dangerous when I have to go to work every day. Maybe having a gun isn't a bad thing. And so we have to figure out a way to pivot our appeals to people on the emotional level, because if not, they will continue to win the argument every single time.
I think that's extremely important. My research convinces me of anything. It's the most vulnerable people in our society who benefit the most from owning guns. There are basically two groups of individuals. There are people who are the most likely victims of violent crime, overwhelmingly poor blacks who live in high crime urban areas, and people who are relatively weaker physically, women and the elderly. You're almost always talking about a young male doing the attack, and when a man is attacking a woman, there's a much larger strength difference that exists there than when a man's attacking another man. And the presence of a gun represents a much bigger relative change in a woman's ability to go and protect herself. But, there's so many things out there in terms of the media that affects people's views. I mean, I often hear that facts just don't matter in this, and I think it's wrong. It's just that you have to realize people think they probably know more about guns than almost any other issue because they're constantly bombarded with news stories about bad things that are happening with guns. We did a survey of media on defensive gun uses in 2021. If you take the 5 largest newspapers in the United States, they had a total of 2,700 gun crime stories. They had a total of 10 defensive gun uses. Most of those were cases where something went wrong with the gun that was there. And, you look at the breakdown, what you have to do. So my guess is the entire debate that we have right now would be dramatically different. Just take mass public shootings. If once in a while the media would report that we've had yet another mass public shooting where guns are banned, 94% of the mass public shootings take place where guns are banned. These criminals may be crazy, but they're not stupid. Their goal is to get media coverage. They know if they want to commit suicide, but they know if they go to a place where victims can't defend themselves, they're going to be more successful in doing it. But the media refuses, just absolutely refuses, to go and cover those parts of their diaries and manifestos where they explicitly explain why they pick the targets that they do. The Nashville Covenant school shooter last year, she apparently looked at 3 other places, the Greenfield Mall and 2 other schools, but they had armed security or allowed people to carry, and so she didn't pick that. You look at the year before, the Buffalo mass murder has a long discussion about why he picked the target that he did. And he explicitly talks about wanting to go to a place where he knew his victims wouldn't have permanent concealed handguns to protect themselves, because he knew it would make it much more difficult for him to go and kill people and therefore get the media attention. On our website at crimeresearch.org, we have dozens of cases from statements. But, if you're going to go and kind of affect the debate as doing that, you have to go and explain to people that they're actually accomplishing the opposite of what they want to do. Rather than making people safe, you think, well, if I just ban guns in an area, they'll make it safe. The problem is banning guns in an area actually creates a magnet for those attacks. Take the Covenant school shooting case. In Tennessee, it was a 6-year prison term if you or I brought a gun into a gun-free school zone. 6 years for us would completely change our lives. But let's say the murderer who killed 6 people had lived. Is 6 years taken away from their 7th life, assuming that they'd be facing 6 life sentences or 6 death penalties, going to deter them from doing that? All the penalties done in that case is ensure that they're the only person with a gun there, and it makes it safer for them to go and do the attacks. Sorry.
Yeah, the only thing I kind of want to bounce off of Shermichael's point, because I think it's well taken. Our opposition is very good at making emotional, or like they like to call it, public interest arguments. If you look at every piece of major gun control at a state level or national level, they always wrap it in the public interest arguments. I mean, we just saw the California's 1 in 30 law, which there was a stay, but a lot of people don't know that's the second iteration of that same law. The first one targeted specifically just rifles, and they said that they had data to show that it would benefit the public's interest, to restrict them in a certain way, to only have access to one firearm or one rifle every 30 days. And then they passed a new one saying, well, that wasn't enough. Actually, we need to restrict one purchase of firearms for every 30 days. And that's just one example. I mean, we can look at when they passed the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, they argue that, hey, it's in the public's best interest that we need to, pass this comprehensive piece of legislation in reaction to Uvalde, which we all know Bipartisan Safer Communities Act would have done absolutely nothing to stop that. So our opposition, sometimes we make fun of them. Yes, they don't know guns at all. They don't know mechanics or anything like that. But they know emotion, and they know how to wrap their legislation in emotion to pull on heartstrings to get these things passed. And they're very crafty at that. And sometimes it's the earnest is on us to have to deconstruct that when we're faced with these pieces of legislation.
And that was great. Actually, stole one of my questions. But yeah, I mean, if everyone would like a chance to respond, and essentially we've seen what compromise gets us. We've seen how the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act was supposed to lead to just some fixes that would prevent things. And instead, now we're looking at the Engage in the Business Universal Registration check rule. It just keeps going and going and going. So really, how is it we stop individual points in times with the average person who says, oh, yes, this is an emotional argument right now. I believe we need to have this point of gun control. How do we cut through all of the other side saying all their fiction, and how do we stop that and present our facts?
Well, that's difficult for a few reasons, and I'm a big believer that the biggest problem we have are these things. These cell phones make life so easy that people don't try to find their own facts. They don't do their own research anymore. And in breaking through that glass ceiling, if you will, of information, we have to go back to what Americans used to do 15 years ago and have conversations with people. We were told for 3 years, you can't talk to people anymore. Get away from them. Stay 6 to 10 feet away. I think a lot of that was by design. They closed taverns and places where people would get together, where people who didn't like what the government did in 1775, that's what they were doing. We have to be able to talk to people and just debunk this machine that everybody has, because it's much easier for us to say, oh, this is the headline, okay, that's what it is, and roll with it, than to have to read a 55-page decision like we do because we're sick. But the conversation has to happen. We have to get talking to people at a local level. We have to get, the people, the community has to get active again, and we can't just hope Ben and his team will take care of things for us. They're really, really good at what they do, but the millions of Americans around the country who still love the country can do more.
Well, I think we need people on CNN. We got to break out of the bubble that we're in on this thing. So you being on CNN is tremendous. I mean, I try to write op-ed pieces for kind of mainstream outlets and things like that. And too much of the discussion is just kind of for people that already agree with us. Most of the people are never going to hear the types of arguments that we're making here right now. And, I can't really blame them for having the views that they do on this type of stuff. So, I mean, thank God somebody's on CNN here. I wish I could be on CNN, but, I try hard. So, the problem is they won't debate people who they think give them a hard time on these types of things often. I can't tell you the number of times I've been invited to be on CNN or NBC or whatever, and I'll get a phone call being disinviting me because they'll say, well, we went to the Bloomberg research person and they said that they wouldn't appear with you. And so then ask me if they still have time to go and get somebody else to replace me. So, thank goodness at least somebody's on CNN there.
Yeah, but they're looking for someone who's going to replace you that won't push back on the other side. That's what they're looking for, right?
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand.
Well, so when they cancel you from it, it's because they know that Dr. Lott's going to come in and he's going to push back on what the other side is saying. They just don't want any part of that, right?
Yeah, they want somebody that's easy to debate. somebody who doesn't know the facts.
Well, and I think one of the reasons that they use this emotional argument, and Anthony, you'll know this, they taught us this in law school, is that when the facts are on your side, pound on the facts.
Right.
When the law's on your side, pound on the law. And when neither's on your side, pound on the podium. And that's what they're doing. They just pound on the podium.
I mean, when the bump stock ruling came, Braden and I talked about this. So I had a clip on CNN, and it went viral, millions of views. And here I am, lone person, gun guy, competitive shooting, love hunting. And they're saying, oh, this is outrageous. Now they're going to be automatic weapons all over the place. And I'm explaining, no, that's not true. Then they bring on a former deputy FBI director. Now, obviously, the title, people say, oh, well, this guy knows more than Shermichael, so we should listen. I said, actually, he's wrong. So I explained the difference. And the anchor of the show said, that actually is a difference. And I was not aware of that. We have to be willing to go into the lion's den and debate and have these tough conversations. I'm unafraid. Doesn't bother me. You're going to be called every name in the book. I don't particularly care because the values that I believe are worth fighting for. Across the country, there are millions of unregistered gun owners. Millions of us. And on the other side, they're very effective in very important states of targeting and engaging with disengaged or what we call low propensity voters. And this is important, folks, because when there are critical elections where you're winning or losing a state by 10,000 votes, 22,000 votes, 33,000 votes, registering just a third of the unregistered gun owners in those states would make a significant difference in us being able to elect leaders at the federal level who will support and defend the Second Amendment, whether that's in Congress, Senate, or the presidency. We're behind in that regard. And Jared sort of touched on this point of going into communities and talking to people. Perhaps there's a level of disengagement among gun owners that, well, our voices don't really matter. Well, that's not true. We absolutely have the mathematical numbers. I have quite a few friends who are working on that right now in Pennsylvania, trying to register hunters who have been disengaged, have never voted in a single election, and they flipped 2 counties that were Democratic counties merely by registering gun owners. That makes a difference. So for those of us who are engaged in this process, when we're going back home, we need to get with our local G.O.A. chapters and figure out, where are these folks? And how do we get them a part of the conversation so when it comes to election time, to your question, Ben, in terms of how do we defend from ridiculous and absurd legislation, when we have the numbers, you can do that. But when you don't have the numbers, they pretty much have a clean slate to pass whatever legislation they have, and they'll say, well, it's for the greater interest of the community or of the country. Don't believe it, because that's always the open door for more compulsory force from the federal government to restrict our rights. But when we have the numbers, we can fight against that.
And to bounce off of that, there's almost 10 million gun owners in this country that are unregistered to vote. Stew on that for a second. If you live in Tennessee, raise your hand.
Probably more than that.
In this state alone, there were over 311,000 unregistered voters that are gun owners or hunters. That's where we lose red states. People are too comfortable when they live in a state like Tennessee. They're too comfortable when they live in a state like Texas or Florida, thinking it'll never happen here. This is Texas. It'll never happen here. This is Appalachia. It will happen here. The places where freedom began no longer lives. So get people out, challenge people who didn't vote the last election, bring them to the poll. We have to get the numbers. Last night I was lucky enough to be at a dinner with G.O.A., and President Trump had an address for us. And he said 4 times in a 5-minute speech to us that for some reason gun owners don't vote. And Shermichael can back this up. The people in the federal level who run elections know this. They'll come to us every 4 years when they want us. Why? Because there's millions of us. And if some of us just voted, we can absolutely flip elections. But we also have to hold them accountable. But we, the gun owners who don't vote, are part of the problem. We complain about the elections and the way things go, but we're not actually actively trying to stop it. So get motivated, tell people that you know and love that there are 311,000 plus people in Tennessee who loved guns enough to protect themselves, their family, and their property, but they don't love America enough to vote to keep that right.
Can I jump on that? The piece that you brought up. I think this is a very important specific point when they are constantly pushing gun control legislation, because the fuel for those is emotion. It's heavily emotion. We said it a couple times. We're going to say it a bunch more. But you have to understand, when you're communicating with someone, we're all emotional creatures. We all have certain things that we'll respond in an emotional way to because they hit our triggers, right? They hit things that are close to us. If you are going into a conversation, particularly in times of tragedy, like where they will always push like the Bipartisan Safe Communities Act, it's a trap every single time. Isn't this awful? How could you allow this? This is the worst thing in the world. We've got to do something. Common sense. This can't continue. And the trap is you jump right into facts, because it is a natural point to say, well, no, I understand what you're saying, but let's talk about the facts. Like, it doesn't make sense to do that because of X, Y, Z. If you move straight to facts and they're still on emotion, Shermichael, I think you said, what's the win rate for them? 100%?
Married folks understand as well.
But the point is, it's not a bad thing to meet someone on an emotional level, to have the emotional connection, say, this absolutely sucks.
I mean, one example. This debate we had I think a year ago, I was on air talking about firearms, and someone said, well, I don't understand why you need AR-15s. They always say assault rifles. And I knew on the stats at that point, it's like, I'm already losing this debate. Like, it was very obvious to me that everybody on the panel, they were all against me. So then I said, all right, I know what I'll do. So I flipped and I said, well, should black people not be able to defend ourselves?
Oh, snap.
It's a legit question.
The whole panel got quiet, and they said, well,
So did
I don't want to tell you. I said, well, that's what you're saying. You're saying that I should not be able to defend myself as a black man. The debate ended. Well, Shermichael, that's not what we're saying. We would never want you not to be able to defend yourself.
But emotionally, that was what you were experiencing.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But that's the point. You can meet on emotion without yielding ground. That's what I'm saying.
Right. When you respond to these things, you need to go and say you're going to hurt people, that it's going to accomplish the exact opposite of what you want to go and do. So you have mandatory gun locks on guns. The thing is, people can't defend themselves. Criminals become emboldened to attack people in their homes. We can get into the data then to go and explain it. But, the thing that they have to understand is that, and one of the reasons why countries like Australia or Canada or whatever will go and, first of all, require people have to lock up their guns, is to try to take away that defensive gun use argument that's there. Because then if people aren't using guns defensively, then you can't point to a cost for them going and pushing other types of gun control that they want to have. But I could go through the whole list. I mean, anything you bring up, whether it's gun locks, I just brought that up because it's an emotional one. You have to point out that safety is being hurt. That's your strongest argument, I think, there. Whether it's gun-free zones, as I was talking about earlier, actually creating a magnet for these people to go and do their attacks, or whatever it is, you have to go and say that it will actually cause more deaths for you to have the gun control rules that you want to have.
Yeah, no, that's 100% correct. That's something we talk about a lot on Capitol Hill. And to kind of go back to Jared and Shermichael's point about this election, about how we should register, what are some of the biggest pieces of fiction that you think the Kamala Harris and Tim Walz ticket will pull out to try to either sway gun owners to their side or to get the anti-gunners to rile them up?
Ben, have you not seen the picture of Tim Walz with a shotgun in the field? I mean, like this. Hello, my fellow gun owners.
Right. Yeah.
I love you guys.
With military weapons
in war.
Yeah,
and stuff. That's why we should take them.
They're already doing that whole dance that, here he is. He's a duck hunter. He is anti-constitution. If you just follow his what he's done as a leader of a state, we know what we're getting. That's the term. Like, when they tell you who they are, believe them. These folks hate everything about the Constitution. They hate the fact that we can defend ourselves. They hate the fact that we're not controllable, and that's ultimately what they're after. And like you said, how do we get through that? They're already using the emotion, right? Was the first thing she said, we're finally going to ban assault weapons and universal background checks and yada, yada, yada. It's the same thing over and over and over every 4 years. But we need to know enough to see through that. We know they're going to say that. I mean, how many times has Biden, strutted out to the lawn after something bad happens and said the same thing? It's time for Congress to finally act to ban assault weapons. They do it every time because they know they're going to get people in the fields, like we've been saying. The key thing is to take clips like when Shermichael is schooling the left on their own platform and amplify that. Take information that you know cuts through that and amplify that. Everybody here has a voice, and the more that voice is used, we can kind of cut through the noise from the left.
I don't think people appreciate that Kamala Harris has actually been the gun control czar, because they set up this Office of Gun Violence Protection or Prevention. And just like Biden announced that she was going to handle the stuff with the border, he made an explicit statement that she was going to oversee that. So the different things that have come out, like the background check rules that they're having, my understanding is that from people in the Department of Justice, she's had her fingers all over that stuff in terms of giving final approval to it. So the Biden administration has been the most anti-self-defense administration we've seen. He's put thousands of gun dealers out of business with his so-called zero tolerance policy. They've put together a national gun registry that's there, at least as of about 2 years ago. They had almost 1 billion transactions that were done there. They did revived Operation Choke Point to go and put pressure on financial institutions not to do it. But Kamala Harris obviously is to the left, even of Biden, in terms of being willing to use executive orders and stuff. What I want is that, her campaign saying, well, she doesn't really want to use executive orders to go and confiscate guns anymore. All you have to do is listen to her videos from 3 years ago, where she not just says she wanted these things, she was excited and enthusiastic about the different things that she was putting forward. And it's just not that. There's so many things that she was excited and enthusiastic about. I mean, it's one thing to have a position. It's another thing to be as excited about those positions as she was, to have, within the last couple of weeks or a few weeks, to have this massive change on all these different issues that she's had. But anyway.
No.
Oh, I mean, we all talk about Kamala Harris. I'm from California. A lot of people know I live in California. Yeah. Jared's trying to get me to come to the great state of Tennessee, to freedom, to America.
If you want them here, yeah.
Pressure. House for sale. With Kamala, I mean, she's a California gun control zealot. I mean, she is what she is. She's very expressed in what she believes. If she had an opportunity to sign an assault weapon ban or a rifle ban, whatever you want to call it, she would do it. If she could do a nationwide magazine ban, she would do it. So, I mean, we take her at face value. If she gets an opportunity, we know what she's going to do. So, I mean, we've had a lot of powwows even while we're here about Trump versus Kamala. I think we're all obviously Trump. I mean, it's a no-brainer. There are still some people on the Second Amendment side who have hesitation about certain Trump policies, but I think that was some misdirection from some other organizations. And he recently was, advocating for G.O.A. and listening to G.O.A. because I think G.O.A. has amazing, understanding about true Second Amendment advocacy. So that's big. But when you talk about like narrative that I think are going to come out soon leading up to the election, the one I'm surprised hasn't been hit hard is the one they were running out for a long time, is like the leading cause of death in children is firearms. I anticipate that's going to get brought up again. Again, an emotional talking point that they love to walk out.
It's also false.
Blatantly
Right, it's completely false.
But they love that one. Pull at heartstrings.
Well,
I mean, how do you top that?
right. But I mean, it's false on many different levels. First of all, I know a lot of people focus on whether they include 18 and 19-year-olds in terms of the definition of kids. But there's a more basic problem, because they're basically assuming that if you just got rid of guns, then those deaths wouldn't be occurring. And the thing is, as I mentioned earlier, you look at any place that's banned all guns or all handguns, murder rates have gone up. They haven't gone down, basically because it's the most law-abiding, good citizens who you disarm, not the criminals. But the second thing is, there's no place in the world that's banned either all guns or all handguns and seen suicides go down. Total suicides. What public health people often look at is firearm suicides, and firearm suicides may drop, but people switch into other ways of committing suicide. And so the notion that somehow if you just got rid of all these guns or had all the rules that they have, you would save those lives, simply the opposite's true. And, it's not just gun bans. That's just a simple example to give people. You have to be careful that the rules that you're putting forward are not primarily going to be obeyed by law-abiding good citizens and making it relatively costly for them to be able to go and get guns, because then you essentially have the same type of perverse effect. Because if you primarily disarm law-abiding citizens relative to criminals, you actually make it easier for criminals to go and commit crimes.
Sorry. I just want to say something, because I love observing things like this and kind of drawing these correlations. A big part of the Kamala Harris reason that was rolled out for Tim Walz was, oh my goodness, he is the coach that you grew up with. He hunts. Have you seen this picture of him standing in a hula hoop with a shotgun? He's one of you. This is amazing. And then they'll go back and they'll change their positions, the exact same point in time, but only around election time. It's very interesting how that happens. Then the rest of the time, and you guys can affirm this, all of a sudden, the vast majority after the election wants all these gun control laws. So on one hand, you've got this perspective of everyone wants gun control. You guys are the outliers. You guys are crazy. And then on the other end, they go, well, wait a minute. We need Tim Walz because everyone loves a good gun owner. Everyone loves a good hunter. And then those old clips, well, those aren't my positions anymore. That's crazy. Hey, quick question to everyone in the room. If it was true that all these mass amounts of people wanted gun control, why are they changing their positions? You're more powerful than you think you are. There's more of you who align to the gun rights side of the argument because they're placating to you. Their actions will always undermine their points. I mean, Shermichael, you're always doing this when you're in these panels. They will always change the positions because they cannot stand on their positions when election time. That speaks to something broader than their positions. I'm just saying.
Well, look, I think that's a good point. I mean, I think everyone knows where Democrats stand on gun control, and it's been the case for quite some time now. We're talking about how to win the argument. That's one proposition. As a strategist, I'm principally concerned with winning elections. And this goes back to the number of unregistered, disengaged, low propensity voters who happen to be gun owners that we have to register. You're looking at a state like Montana, John Tester, Democrat. I'm looking at a state like Pennsylvania. These are two critical states, even Michigan, I'll throw Michigan in, three critical states, right? If Republicans could flip Pennsylvania, Michigan, you win the presidency.
I got the numbers right here.
Let's go over the numbers.
Pennsylvania, 515,000 plus hunters and lawful gun owners not registered. Michigan, 370,000 plus. North Carolina, 370,000 plus. These states all have over 500,000. Georgia, Wisconsin, Missouri, and Virginia. Now, I look at that list, almost every one of them is a swing state. And in fact, I saw an article today that said Trump's route to the presidency goes through Pennsylvania.
That's right. So Pennsylvania, 2020, 88,000 vote difference, I believe. Michigan, 150,000 vote difference. Yep. You just heard the numbers of.
And then Montana, 52,000. Now you know how much difference 52,000 votes would make in a state like Montana. Big difference.
A big difference.
Yeah, there's only like 54,000 people that live there.
That's right.
It's not a lot.
It's going to be 50. There's going to be 54,001 pretty soon when y'all turn on YouTube and see my channel's called Montana Gun Law.
And so the point, folks, when you look at those numbers, you win back the Senate, you win the executive, be in the White House. Then you begin the process of crystallizing protections around the Second Amendment through the legislative process. And Ben, they work a lot on this on Capitol Hill. And so at some point in time, I'm not necessarily interested in engaging with people in terms of trying to persuade them, because at some point I realize the election is less than 90 days away. I have only so much time to register my people to vote before there's a cutoff, before there's a deadline. And so again, I don't want to overemphasize this point, but it is really important for everybody in this room to get engaged in the political process. We can try to win the argument after the election, but at some point we don't have time to debate. We just don't have the time to debate those nuances. We have to try to win. And elections is about addition and not subtraction. We have the math on our side if we can engage with those folks and get them registered to vote. I mean, again, keep this in mind. Regain control of the Senate, win back the White House. The House, we'll see what happens there. But you have the possibility with those new numbers of having an electoral sweep. Just
and
think about
control
that.
of the Supreme Court.
And the Supreme Court. And we got Bruin because of the Supreme Court, because a Republican president was able to appoint conservative jurists. There will be more than likely 2 vacancies in this next term. If we do not win this election, and you guys really have to understand this, there potentially could be changes, not only to our Second Amendment rights, but a host of other rights that we vehemently care about. So this isn't just about protecting our rights to bear arms, folks. You're talking about the future of the country for your children and for your grandchildren. So we have to get off our butts and engage with other people who think like us, but who don't believe that their voices or their votes matter. I've been on a lot of campaigns, and I've lost a lot of them by a slim margin, thousands of votes, hundreds of votes, depending on the locality. And you always realize, if we would have engaged with just the 5,000 people who are like us, think like us, but we didn't, because we thought we had it in the can. We cannot afford to do that in 2024.
And just to back up Sherm, what he said there is 2 of the Supreme Court justices, if you read these decisions, who have been the strongest, not just Second Amendment side, but constitutionalists that we have in the court, are Justices Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas. And guess who is considering retiring? Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas. This is a huge election, whether they're just dangling out there to try to influence votes or they're serious about it. We can't risk not winning the corner office.
Well, Thomas will be 80 at the end of the next administration, and Alito will be 78. But at the end of this year, you're going to have over, I think it's like 63% of the circuit and district court judges are going to be Democrats. So, and I'm sure our person at the end there can explain the shenanigans that the courts are doing, to kind of delay cases getting up to the Supreme Court.
I mean, they sit on these things and they age them like fine wine until the venue and the jurisdiction changes, and then suddenly it's like time to bring them back. I'll say one thing. If you take a look at the judges at the lower level federal benches that President Trump appointed, their record on upholding Second Amendment issues is remarkably good. Really, really good. So I know there's debate about whether President Trump is a good Second Amendment president or bad. He's better than the alternative, that's for sure. But if you really want to see where the proof is, take a look at the judges he's appointed. He's done an outstanding job in that department.
Well, there's no other president in my lifetime, even Reagan. You have people like Easterbrook or Posner, who hardly would be good defenders of individual rights to self-defense. And there's a number of others that we can talk about. But the one who's appointed the most people who are consistent in terms of protecting the constitutional rights has been Trump by a mile.
All right, guys, we got about 3 minutes left. Any final key takeaways? Is there anything that you think the average gun owner and the average G.O.A.L. attendee should know about the fact versus fiction debate? Is there any specific piece of fiction that you want to overrule, or is there any specific
I'm going to be
fact?
doing something at 2 just for a few minutes, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this voting thing. But, we keep talking about how we win the battle. If we start winning elections, there's no battles to win anymore. We win that battle, we don't have to worry about all the other stuff. So that's why y'all got to get out and vote. I know all you guys get out and vote, but you got your brother-in-laws, your uncles, your cousins, your neighbors, all of those people that aren't doing it. And it's your job to get out there and get them registered now.
I'm going to follow up on that. It's my line of work. It's what I do every single day. We have to engage in the political process. If we continue on the trajectory that we're currently on, it's going to be too late. I'm just being very honest. It will be too late. I can guarantee you the types of justices that a Harris-Walz administration will nominate to the Supreme Court, not a single person in this room will be happy with. And again, it's just not the Second Amendment, folks. You're talking about a complete change of every single value that we maintain to be important to us, whether it's morality, whether it's customs of behavior, whether it's our beliefs in free market economy and capitalism, parental rights, whether it's the belief that we as individuals should be able to chart our own future over the government. All of these things are uniquely connected to the Second Amendment. And so I just cannot overemphasize this enough. We have to vote, and you have to engage in the process and bring other people with you, because I promise you guys, I do this every single day. If we don't win this election, trying to reverse what will come will be almost impossible.
Look, I don't make Second Amendment arguments. I leave that to everybody here. To me, the bottom line is safety and what saves the most lives. And my own belief is that when you go and you bring up the Second Amendment, there are basically three groups of people: those who will disagree with you no matter what you say, those who will agree with you, and then there are people in the middle. And I just find, and I could be wrong, and you guys may have a different view, I just find when you start bringing up rights types arguments, you lose a lot of people in the middle. Because a lot of people are willing to trade off freedom for safety. And the other side's always trying to make the argument that they're trying to make people safer. And to me, the strongest way to do it is just to go and deal directly with that and just say, look, what motivates me, and I know it motivates me because as I said, I don't make Second Amendment type arguments, is what will save the most lives. And pointing out that their rules will actually, whether it's gun-free zones or gun locks or whatever, will actually endanger lives and accomplish the opposite of what they want to do.
One of the biggest things, fact versus fiction, the biggest piece of fiction, I hope you take away from this, the fiction is that Donald Trump is ahead big time. A couple weeks ago, that was true. But Kamala Harris, the switch to Kamala, has reinvigorated the Democrat Party and the Democrat donors. So if you think that he's ahead and we don't have to get involved, you're buying the fiction.
Yeah, another fiction I think you take away from this panel, because we've all talked about it. There's a big fiction that goes around that your vote doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's rigged, whatever. Your vote matters. The founders knew your vote mattered. You know your vote matters. So we can win this. Maybe make it too big to rig. Get out and vote, because make it huge.
Huge. Very huge. Are we cool?
Yeah, close this out real quick.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the biggest fiction that I would say is the lie that is perpetrated upon everyone in this room, watching all the gun owners out here, that you don't really matter. You are demonized for being a gun owner because this is your fault. This thing happened because you exist. The bottom line is you guys are what makes it. You guys make it or break it. To be quite honest, if you believe into the lie that you are kind of isolated and you don't matter, and maybe I am on the outs. No, look at everything. Look, I'm just gonna talk about it real quick.
There you go.
Oh, did mine die in your state? That's disrespectful. Well, you know what?
Playing his music.
It's okay. But the bottom line is you matter, guys. Don't let them lie to you and think you don't. There are more of you than any other, what they would call special interest group out there. Just don't believe it. You're more powerful than they want you to think you are.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Can we have a quick round of applause for our panelists?
Thank you very much.